Trump announces secret Greenland deal at Davos. On January 21, 2026, the world's media was glued to Donald Trump's fiery performance at Davos, but they were watching the wrong thing. His public speech, full of bluster and demands for Greenland, wasn't the real story. It was a spectacle, a masterclass in distraction. Just hours later, a cryptic post on Truth Social revealed the real play, a framework of a future deal. While global leaders breathed a sigh of relief that immediate tariffs and military action were off the table, they completely missed the point. The public de-escalation was just cover for a private agreement, one forged away from the cameras, with massive implications for global security. So, what was really agreed to in that meeting with NATO's chief? What is this secret framework, and what could it mean for the balance of power in the Arctic? We're investigating the deal that nobody is talking about, but everybody should be watching. The implications are bigger than you think. The scene at the World Economic Forum in Davos was pure political theater. President Donald Trump took the stage and delivered a speech that was part performance, part threat. He told the assembled leaders that the United States was seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland. He painted a picture of a vulnerable Arctic, a defenseless Denmark, and an America that had no choice but to step in. "I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark," he began, before quickly turning the tables. "But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States." He even rewrote history to fit his story, claiming, "After the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that? But we did it. But how ungrateful are they now?" The rhetoric was pointed and personal, calling Greenland a big, beautiful piece of ice, and framing its acquisition as a non-negotiable matter of national security. And this wasn't just talk. It was backed by a very real threat. In the days leading up to Davos, Trump had threatened to impose a 10% tariff, rising to 25% on 8 European nations, including key allies like Germany, France, and the UK, for daring to oppose his ambitions. The message was crystal clear. You can say yes, and we'll be appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember. A transatlantic trade war was hanging in the balance, and the tension in Davos was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the crisis seemed to vanish. After a private meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Trump announced a stunning reversal. The tariffs were suspended, for now. He publicly promised he would not use military force to take the island. The media reported a de-escalation, a win for diplomacy. But then came the Truth Social post, a tiny detail that almost everyone overlooked. In it, Trump declared that he and Rutte had formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. It was incredibly vague, with zero specifics. Publicly, Washington and Copenhagen scrambled to clarify that this framework was just a reaffirmation of existing treaty obligations. But the Post also mentioned that future talks would be led by a hand-picked U.S. team, Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. That's not the language of reaffirming an old treaty. That's the language of a brand new negotiation, hidden in plain sight. To figure out what this secret framework could be, you have to look past the headlines and into the fine print of history. The official story is that this new agreement is just a rehash of the 1951 U.S.-Denmark Defense Agreement. That treaty, signed in the early days of the Cold War, gave the United States extensive rights to operate military bases in Greenland for the collective defense of NATO. It's the legal basis for Thule Air Base, now Patuxent Space Base, which is America's northernmost military installation and a vital hub for missile warning and space surveillance. But that old treaty is crystal clear about one thing: sovereignty. It allows the U.S. military broad freedom to operate, but it explicitly states that it does not touch Danish sovereignty. The U.S. can run bases, but it can't make laws, control borders, or exercise any civil authority. This is the line that Denmark and Greenland have held, stating firmly that the island is not for sale. Trump's history lesson at Davos? To be blunt, it was completely wrong. The United States never owned Greenland. During World War II, after Nazi Germany occupied Denmark, the U.S. set up a protectorate over Greenland to keep it out of enemy hands, citing the Monroe Doctrine. It was a temporary military guardianship, not a transfer of ownership. After the war, control went right back to Denmark because it had always been Danish territory. So the idea that the U.S. gave it back is a total fiction designed to cook up a sense of historical grievance. This isn't the first time Trump has gone after Greenland. His 2019 offer to buy the island was famously shot down by Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen as absurd, which led to a diplomatic meltdown and a cancelled presidential visit. But this time is different. He isn't talking about a simple real estate deal anymore. He's talking about national security, about his Golden Dome missile defense system, and about a legal setup that goes way beyond what exists today. He has said you can't defend a territory on a lease. You need ownership. The public framework might point to the 1951 treaty, but the quiet talks run by Vance and Rubio are almost certainly aimed at creating something entirely new, a deal that gives America ownership-like powers without the politically impossible price tag of an actual purchase. So if it's not a sale, and it's more than the old treaty, what exactly is being negotiated behind closed doors? The most logical and alarming possibility is a concept we're calling sovereignty minus. Now, that's not an official term, but it's the best way to describe a model that would give the U.S. everything it wants while letting Denmark and Greenland keep up the appearance of sovereignty. To get what this means, just look at the British sovereign base areas, the SBAs, on the island of Cyprus. When Cyprus gained independence from Britain in 1960, the UK held on to two small, strategically vital pockets of land on the southern coast, Akrotiri and Dhekelia. On these little pockets of land, the United Kingdom has absolute sovereignty. For all intents and purposes, it's British soil. The British military can build what it wants, operate how it wants, and answers only to London. Cyprus governs the rest of the island, but on those bases, British law applies. Now, apply this model to Greenland. The sovereignty minus theory suggests the secret plan is to do the exact same thing, establish American sovereign base areas in Greenland. The U.S. wouldn't buy the whole island. That's a political non-starter. Instead, it would carve out specific zones, maybe around Patuxent Space Base and other key locations, and be granted full, untouchable U.S. sovereignty over them. So why would Trump want this? Simple. It solves his biggest problem. He has argued again and again that a mere lease isn't good enough for the kind of military infrastructure he has in mind, especially for his Golden Dome missile defense system. This massive project, planned for completion by 2029, involves a network of advanced interceptors to shield the U.S. from hypersonic and ballistic missiles. Building the ground components of such a sensitive system on foreign soil, where it's subject to the political whims of Copenhagen or Nuuk, is a huge strategic vulnerability. Sovereignty minus gets rid of that vulnerability completely. It would give the Pentagon a free hand to build, expand, and operate without ever needing to ask for permission. And on top of that, this model would let the U.S. potentially secure preferential access to Greenland's vast mineral wealth. The island is thought to hold massive deposits of rare earth elements, the key ingredients for everything from electric cars to military guidance systems. While Trump publicly claims his interest is all about national security, not minerals, a secret deal could easily include clauses granting the U.S. first refusal rights on future mining projects, effectively boxing out competitors like China. In return, the U.S. could offer Denmark and Greenland a package that's almost too good to refuse: huge economic investment, taking over all defense costs, and ironclad security guarantees in a dangerous new Arctic. It would be presented as a modern necessity, a simple update to an old alliance. But in reality, it would redraw the map of the North Atlantic, creating permanent enclaves of American power right on the doorstep of Europe and Russia. Understanding these hidden power plays and the strategies driving them is what we do here. The headlines only ever tell part of the story. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and understand the deeper geopolitical currents shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us continue to bring you this kind of in-depth analysis that goes beyond the superficial news cycle. This obsession with Greenland isn't happening in a vacuum. It is the central board in a new great game for control of the Arctic, a three-way fight between the United States, Russia, and China. For decades, the region was known for high north, low tension, but that era is over. Done. Climate change is melting the ice, opening up new shipping lanes, and making once unreachable resources reachable. This has turned a frozen wasteland into the world's next strategic flashpoint. First up, Russia. Moscow sees the Arctic as its strategic backyard. It has spent years remilitarizing its northern coast, reopening Soviet-era bases, deploying advanced air defense systems, and launching a new fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers. Its goal is to control the Northern Sea Route, a shipping lane that could one day rival the Suez Canal, and to project its power into the North Atlantic. Then you have China. Despite having no Arctic land, Beijing has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is aggressively pushing its Polar Silk Road. Through scientific expeditions and investments, China is maneuvering for access. It wants a voice in how the region is run and, more importantly, a share of the immense natural resources. Chinese companies already have stakes in potential Greenlandic mining projects, a fact that has Washington deeply concerned. Faced with this growing Russo-Chinese partnership in the north, the U.S. is playing catch-up. From a strategic point of view, Greenland is the geostrategic linchpin of the entire region. It's the anchor of the GIUK Gap, the naval choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. Controlling this gap is the key to controlling the North Atlantic and, by extension, defending both North America and Western Europe. An American-controlled Greenland effectively slams that door shut, creating a massive barrier to Russian and Chinese naval ambitions. But it's not just about military positioning. This game is also about resources. The modern economy runs on rare earth minerals, and China currently dominates the supply, giving Beijing huge leverage. Greenland is estimated to hold some of the largest undeveloped rare earth deposits outside of China. Securing access to these minerals isn't just an economic opportunity. It's a strategic imperative for the U.S. to break its dependency on a major rival. A sovereignty-minus deal that includes mineral rights would be a devastating blow to China's resource dominance and a huge step toward American strategic autonomy. Trump's speech may have focused on the Golden Dome, but the long-term prize is as much about the ground beneath the ice as it is about the sky above it. These secret negotiations can really only go one of three ways, each with profound consequences for the world. In this future, the U.S. negotiation team, led by Vance and Rubio, pulls it off. Through a mix of economic carrots and political sticks, Denmark and Greenland quietly agree to a revised treaty establishing American sovereign base areas. The deal is sold to the public as a simple modernization of the NATO alliance, a partnership for Arctic security. Immediately, the U.S. military begins massive construction in its new sovereign zones. The Golden Dome missile shield is fast-tracked, giving the U.S. an unprecedented defensive advantage in the Arctic. American investment pours into Greenland, but primarily in ways that serve U.S. interests. American firms get first dibs on starting up rare earth mining operations. The geopolitical fallout is immediate and intense. Russia and China call it aggressive American expansionism and accelerate their own militarization of the Arctic. More importantly, the Western alliance cracks. America's European allies, having been bullied by tariff threats, feel completely sidelined. The EU accelerates its push for strategic autonomy, trying to reduce its dependence on a newly assertive United States. The transatlantic relationship changes, shifting from a partnership to a hierarchy, with the U.S. sitting firmly at the top. In this scenario, the secret gets out. Details of the sovereignty-minus proposal leak, igniting a political firestorm in both Greenland and Denmark. The Greenlandic government, facing massive public opposition, formally and publicly rejects any deal that transfers sovereignty, no matter how small. Citing its right to self-determination, Nuuk declares the negotiations are over. Denmark, caught in the middle, has no choice but to back Greenland. It might even seek support from the European Union, possibly triggering the EU's anti-coercion instrument against the U.S., a tool designed for exactly this kind of situation. This puts President Trump in a very tough spot. Having publicly backed down, does he now reimpose tariffs on his allies, throwing NATO into its worst-ever crisis? Does he pull U.S. forces from Patuxent out of spite, abandoning America's most critical Arctic asset? Or does he back down again, revealing his threats as a bluff? The result is a frozen conflict not on a battlefield, but in the diplomatic arena. U.S.-European relations are deeply damaged, trust is shattered, and the standoff becomes a festering wound in the Western alliance. And then there's Scenario 3, which might be the most likely and most insidious of all. No grand deal is ever actually signed, But that framework from the Truth Social post is left hanging in the air, deliberately vague. The negotiations drag on for years behind closed doors, with no end in sight. The U.S. doesn't get its sovereign bases, but it never officially gives up the demand. In this state of perpetual limbo, the threat itself becomes the weapon. Greenland and Denmark are forced to live under the constant shadow of American pressure. Potential investors in Greenland's economy, especially in its mineral sector, get spooked by the uncertainty. Does the U.S. have some unspoken veto over these projects? No one knows, and that fear is enough to freeze development. For the U.S., this ambiguity becomes a powerful lever to pull with its European allies on a whole range of other issues. Whenever Washington needs support on trade, or Iran or NATO funding, the Greenland file can always be reopened. The suspended tariffs serve as a permanent reminder of America's economic power. In this scenario, Trump doesn't need to win the argument over Greenland. He just needs the argument to never end. Donald Trump's move at Davos was a calculated masterpiece of geopolitical theater. He used a loud public threat to create a crisis, then seemed to generously resolve it, all while kicking off a much quieter and far more important negotiation behind the scenes. The world's attention was on the speech, but the real play was the cryptic Truth Social post that came after. While the details are still secret, the sovereignty minus model, creating pockets of full American sovereignty on Greenlandic soil, is the most logical explanation for what Washington is really after. It's the only plan that checks all of Trump's boxes: total control over critical military installations for his Golden Dome shield, a way to get around Danish and Greenlandic politics, and a strategic edge in the race for Arctic resources. But this strategy is a massive gamble. It treats an ally's territory like a poker chip and the entire NATO alliance like a business deal, where loyalty is only guaranteed if you play along. So the ultimate question remains, is this a brilliant, forward-thinking move to secure America's future in the 21st century's most critical new frontier? Or is it a reckless maneuver that prioritizes short-term dominance at the risk of shattering the very alliances that have kept the West safe for more than 70 years? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping our world.